Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are. My name is Rafa Shams. I am the Director of Communications and Programming at the Academic Engagement Network, and I am pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Leading an Israeli University in a Time of Crisis, Lessons of Resilience and Hope, from President Daniel Chamovitz of Ben-Gurion University. On October 7th, Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, located in the city of Beersheba, suffered the highest casualties of any major research university in Israel, with over 100 members of the university community murdered and 10 taken hostage. Thousands of students were called up to the reserves, interrupting their studies as they fought in Gaza and then in Lebanon. How does the university weather such devastation? How does it pursue excellence and innovation amidst crisis? And in a time of increasing efforts to isolate Israeli academics and their institutions, what are the mutual benefits of international collaboration and exchange? We at AEN are honored to have with us today Daniel Chamovitz, the seventh president of Ben-Gurion University, who will share his insights on these issues and more. Born in Pennsylvania, Chamovitz has served in his role since 2019, after serving as Dean of the Faculty of Life Sciences at Tel Aviv University for a number of years. A world-renowned plant geneticist, he founded the interdisciplinary MANA Center program in food safety and security at Tel Aviv University, and his 2012 popular science book, What a Plant Knows, received critical attention worldwide and has been translated into 18 languages. I would be remiss if at this time I did not mention the situation in Israel. We are thinking of our friends, families, and colleagues there who are still under threat. And of course, we are thinking of the 101 people, living and dead, still being held hostage. We are thinking of them always and hoping always for their return home. Before we begin, I want to introduce and turn it over briefly to Mark Yudof, the chair of AEN's advisory board. Before taking this role at AEN, Mark was the president of the University of California System, chancellor of the University of Texas System, and president of the University of Minnesota System. He is an expert on constitutional law, freedom of expression, and education law. He is a member of the governing boards of Hebrew University and the University of Haifa. Mark will share a few words about AEN's commitment to academic collaborations. Thank you, Mark, for being with us today.
Rafa, thank you. And I'm just delighted. And the first thing I want to do is give a shout out to Danny. I mean, I would say, well, first I want to say university presidents face all sorts of crises, from COVID to demonstrations and so forth, but nothing of the scale, the importance, the magnitude, and the heartache of what presidents of Israeli universities are facing. And I also want to say, if it's an emergency, if there's a problem, I want Danny on my team. I greatly admire this man, and I'm thrilled, Danny, that you agreed to do this webinar. The only other point I wanted to make today is I am a deep believer in academic exchanges of professors, exchanges of students. I'm a great fan of collaboration in the sciences and research generally, almost no matter what the field. I think it strengthens universities, and I think that's true, should be true irrespective of politics. It is an opportunity for us to try to advance the ball of peaceful relations, and also advancing the ball of knowledge, which is critically important. And AEN stands firmly in that camp, with all these calls to cancel programs with Israeli universities. I just want the presidents to know that we are firmly on the side of collaboration, exchange, and intellectual interchange. So with that, I'll turn it back to Rafa and to Danny, and thank you both for doing this.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Now I'm pleased to get going with President Chamovitz. For those attending the webinar, I ask that you please hold your questions for the Q&A afterwards, at which point you can type it into the chat or use the raised hands emoji. So the first question is, we both Mark and I mentioned how your university was devastated by the events of October 7th. Could you share more about how the university community more broadly experienced that terrible day and its aftermath?
Sure. Thanks for having me here. And this is actually sort of therapeutic being here for me because, as I mentioned before everyone came on, a few days ago I was in Oxford giving a talk about the university and about what we do in accessibility in diversity and integration of different populations. And my talk was broken up 7 times by Palestinian, well, actually, they weren't Palestinian protesting for Palestine, so to speak. I had to be escorted off stage a few times. So this is a lot nicer audience to be with. So yeah, October 7th, 6:30, like every Israeli, like everyone around the world, we all know where we were at 6:29 on October 7th. And at 8 a.m., I was writing my first email to the university, trying to make sure that our students were safe, what was going on in our dormitories, just to let everyone know that we were trying to be on the ball behind to understand what was going on at our campuses, making sure that the bomb shelters were open and try to take stock of where we knew people were. Um, at the end of the next morning, I had to form a committee that no university president should ever have to form, which I called the Mourning Committee, the MOURN Committee, because we had to decide who we were mourning. I had originally decided, I had said that I was going to go to every funeral, which became clearly apparent that that would be impossible. And so who are we counting? The first person that we knew to be killed within the university was the daughter and son-in-law of our professor, Elon Troen. And they were both graduates of the university. So do we count only students? Do we count faculty? Do we count staff? Do we count immediate family members? Do we count alumni? Who are we counting? Because the numbers were just getting so and so large. At the end, we decided we would count, of course, students, staff, faculty, alumni, and immediate family members of staff and faculty. And so by the time a week had gone, or 10 days, and the bodies were counted, 75 people were killed on that day within the university. 600 were made homeless, 10 were taken hostage. It was overwhelming. I went to 40 Shiva calls, the Jewish mourning period. So if 75 were killed, only 40 Shiva calls? Because some were for 2, 3, and 4 people in entire families. And now, as the war has lingered on over 14 months later, our numbers have reached 117. And that still includes one of our students who was killed as a hostage in Gaza, whose body is being held, and 3 other family members or alumni who are still being held hostage. I could go on that, but I mean, just more, the horror stories.
Thank you, despite the horror and the trauma and the pain, for sharing that. I think I've heard this from you several times, including when I visited in person with faculty delegations, and every time it's chilling. And I want to thank you for sharing those stories. It's crucial for building empathy and understanding. So alongside the tragedy and trauma, Ben-Gurion University is also a place of innovation, hope, and resilience. Could you tell us more about how the university has coped with the many pressures on its students and faculty, and how it is supporting them in Israeli society more broadly in this time?
Well, the spot of light in that awful day of October 7th was that on October 7th, when there were 900 casualties at our medical school university hospital, 900 casualties in one hospital, 500 of our students came and volunteered, not only medical students, physical therapy, psychology. People just descended on the hospital to try to help with the chaos. I would like to say it's because I made a public call, go and volunteer, but it's within the Ben-Gurion DNA to take responsibility. That next day on October 8th, our students had already come up with 2 distribution centers that were distributing food, clothes, toiletries, toys to the thousands of refugees and to the reservists who were being called up. The people from industrial engineering were making applications on how to distribute the food. They made applications for truck drivers, for volunteer drivers to come in, and it was tons and tons of supplies that were being distributed through the university. On the 3rd day, we opened up a school. We opened up 3 schools in our Eilat campus for the refugees, the children there who had just seen horrible things. 1 school on our Sde Boker campus, 5 schools on our campus in the center of Beersheba. And this spirit really defined how we dealt with the tragedy. Our name is, we're Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. We're not Ben-Gurion University of Beersheba. And what that meant is that we had to take responsibility both for our small community of the university and the greater community of the Negev, especially in a time when all of the government ceased functioning. So it was civil society, primarily us in the South, that took control. We had hackathons and innovation competitions. For example, one of our secretaries, one of the administrative assistants, came up with an idea where we gave her the funds to do this. She rented a flatbed truck, bought 4 washing machines, a generator, and a huge tank of water, and then drove her truck around to all the places where the reservists were accumulating and they couldn't wash their clothes, or where the refugees were, and just had a place for people to wash their clothes. And it's like a type of, innovation which normally would go into entrepreneurship. And then we had the problem of, what do you do when you have 1/3 of your undergraduate student body in reserve duty? We had 6,700 students in reserve duty on January 1st when the school year started. 6,700, and about 200 staff and faculty members. How do you run an academic year in that way? In the beginning, I had made the naive mistake in saying that we wouldn't open the academic year till all the reservists had come back. No one, we're really good at a 6-day war, but no one had imagined a 14-month war. So how do you run a university like that? How do you assure that do you go back to having student parties? What type of atmosphere do you have on campus? And I can say that now that we've actually finished the year, where the majority of these reservists did between 100 and 200 days of reserves, their dropout rate is lower than the average dropout rate. And we did that by doubling our class load. We gave 1st semester classes in 2nd semester. We gave 2nd semester classes over the summer. But when we started studying how this happened, it was the support that the students gave each other, which enabled them to get through the academic year. Even Noah Argamani, who I think most of you may remember, she was that beautiful girl who had her hands out saying, please don't kill me. When she was rescued in April, and I visited, she's a 3rd-year computer science student, computer engineering student. When I visited with her a week after she was rescued, what she wanted to talk about was how she would be able to graduate with her class and wouldn't lose a year. It's like, and she was already back in summer school this summer.
Those are incredible stories of resilience and hope and withstanding all of this devastation and crisis with the tools.
Actually, the reservists made the student union continue the parties. because the people who were not in the reserves were feeling guilty for having a party. But the reservists let them know, we want you to start the parties because when we get out, we're going to need it more than ever.
That's amazing. I remember when I visited, one of your colleagues was saying that Ben-Gurion, of all the major institutions in Israel, is known for being a very social place. You know, maybe more so than the others. And so it's very inspiring to hear how that remained that way during this time of crisis. So I mentioned that, I was honored to meet you in March of this year when I participated in multiple faculty solidarity delegations to Israel. Many of the faculty in AEN's network, including those of us who are watching today and those who will view the recording later, are very concerned about efforts to boycott or otherwise isolate Israeli academics and their institutions. They support deepening U.S.-Israel academic ties, as Mark mentioned earlier. Could you share more about how your institution and other institutions in Israel have benefited from its collaborations with academics and institutions from around the world, particularly after October 7th?
Well, after October 7th is a whole different story than before October 7th. Everyone's world is before and after. I'm sure your worlds are also. I just came back from Toronto working with the Jewish community in Toronto. It's a completely different place before and after October 7th. Before October 7th, Ben-Gurion University is like any university in the world. Our campus in Stable Care, for example, where we have the Blaustein Institutes for Desert Research, half of the research students are foreign. So that we had collaborations with Beida in Peking University and collaborations with New Jersey Institute of Technology and with Drexel. And, it's like any other universities, which you're all aware of. But then came October 7th. And on October 9th, I wrote a letter to 20-30 university presidents describing what had happened in Israel, what had happened specifically at Ben-Gurion University, putting it in perspective. And in this letter, I said, I wish I should have gotten it out, but something along these lines. I fear that as Israel moves from a defensive to an offensive position, there may be some types of anti-Israel protests on your campus bordering on a BDS. And I hope that I can count on you for standing behind making sure that your campus is welcoming Israeli and Jewish students. I don't even think I said Jewish. I just think I said Israeli because it never even occurred to me what was going to happen. There may be, it was so naive, but I had been at Columbia University in the early 80s during the first Lebanese war. I knew what went on then, and I knew that this was going to happen, just no one realized how much. By the way, only a few of the presidents actually responded. And so much so that when I visited Columbia University on December 1st, I had a meeting with the vice president where he put it on a Friday at 4:30 in the afternoon, which in itself is a sort of inconvenient time to invite an Israeli university president to come in the middle of winter. And then at 4:25, have the meeting canceled while I'm waiting in the waiting room. I was just an unfortunate and unwelcome persona non grata. As I was a mirror that they didn't want to look in. And this has affected how we see so the delegations that came, and as I said to the delegations, it made us feel great, but I think it also made the people who were coming on the delegation maybe even feel they needed it as much as we needed it. But the question is, what's going to happen at the university level? I led a delegation from Ben-Gurion University to Penn in April. And we were very welcome on the campus, which made us feel great. But they would not publicize our visit. Same thing at Drexel, great university, and at NJIT. So behind the scenes, we're welcome. But we realized that Israelis are uncomfortable. Now, at the same time, it's completely clear that what you're seeing on the news is not what we're seeing on the news. And your students have to deal with different things. But I became quite active during this time. I found myself on CNN, on NBC, on BBC, on being interviewed over and over again. And when it came down to it, when we look at the campuses around North America and specifically, it all came down to a question of leadership, of at the very top. Those leaders, those presidents who know how to draw very clear lines about what's acceptable behavior did an excellent job. Now, those people did not get enough attention. I think we gave too much attention to the ones who were doing an awful job. We gave an honorary doctorate to Michael Crow in May, and he brought a huge delegation. And he gave a very inspirational speech when he talked about that the freedom of fear is as important as the freedom of speech. And he was not going to let people be afraid on his campus. As we're moving forward, I have another hat that I was wearing, as I was telling you earlier, that I'm the chairman of the Council of Israeli University Presidents. And we've had to found a task force to fight the BDS, which is encroaching everywhere. There's both the active BDS, which is going back as universities are taking a step back, but there's the passive BDS, which is we're really afraid of, which is that Israelis aren't being invited to campuses or to conferences because they're saying, look, it's going to be difficult for us to provide security for you, like what happened to me in Oxford. Israelis, we're getting academics who refuse to write letters of recommendation. There are societies like in anthropology and sociology, which are not letting Israelis participate anymore. And this passive BDS is perhaps the most dangerous because it makes us, again, an unfortunate partner. And so maybe it's better for us not to partner with Israel right now.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing those stories. I recall a young researcher that we spoke to on this delegation, and this was back in March. And so I'm sure the data is even more extensive and even more unsettling now. But she was essentially interviewing junior scholars at Israeli institutions, and they expressed a lot of fear about their future prospects for academic collaborations and research, being invited to conferences, being invited to lecture. It's not even the high profile stuff like people being disrupted. It's the abstract that doesn't get reviewed, or the person who doesn't get invited, or the senior scholar who chooses not to be an advisor. A lot of ghosting and a lot of passive BDS, as you say. I guess I would follow up to ask, what have been some points of light in terms of collaboration in the post-October 7th landscape, in addition to the delegations?
So the points of light have been those universities which have made clear statements. I actually just, as we're talking, I'm sorry, I just got it. It's really funny because we were talking about this earlier. I just got a WhatsApp from Chancellor Joan Gable, who at University of Pittsburgh, and she hosted one of my colleagues, Professor Dr. Tarek Abu Hamed, who is affiliated with Ben-Gurion University at their Arava Institute. She met him through me, and she hosted him just now at Pitt to talk about Arab-Jewish interactions on campuses as a paradigm for shared societies. And it's these type of things where people have made brave decisions to continue hosting Israelis, which, because it would be just so much easier to say, come back next year. This has made me feel, this has given us a lot of hope. When I was invited now to Arizona State University, we're actually trying to consider, why are we running after Columbia and and Harvard? Maybe we should be turning our attention to the places that want to collaborate with us. That's actually, by the way, why I'm leading a delegation to India next month to reestablish our collaborations with Indian universities, which really don't care so much about the BDS.
That's amazing and exciting to hear. So I guess my final official question before we turn it over to a Q&A with our audience is this December 8th will be Ben-Gurion Day, which is a day that marks the yahrzeit of Israel's first prime minister and celebrates his vision for Israel. What would you like people to know about how Ben-Gurion University is fulfilling and expanding upon his vision, especially in these difficult times?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, on Sunday, we're launching publicly a new large language model, which is called ChatDBG. We've trained a large language model on all of David Ben-Gurion's archives, which we house in our university. And so you can ask Ben-Gurion any question you want, even about now. And so when I was in Oxford, I asked, so David, so what would you tell people? I'm now at Oxford and there are calls to boycott me. What would you tell the students and the faculty of Oxford? And in the words of David Ben-Gurion, it's even in his cadence. It says you need to emphasize how higher education needs to and research need to remain above any political interest, because it's only through cutting edge research and interaction of diverse populations that we succeed in moving the world forward. It was something like that. It's actually a fun thing to play with. But if we go back to 1958, at a time when there were more camels in Beersheba than there were people, David Ben-Gurion called for the founding of the Negev Research Institute, which would then become Ben-Gurion University 12 years hence. And at that opening speech, he said, researchers and scientists will sit in the gates of the Negev, uncover its secrets, how to make energy from the sun, water from the dew in the air, food from the dry sands, to take advantage of the resources that are until now going to waste for the good of our country and humanity, or the world, or something like that. I mean, think of this, 1958. No one was talking about climate change and sustainability or anything. And David Ben-Gurion understood the transformational power of research to enable Israel not only to survive in the desert, but to thrive in the desert. And it is that spirit which brings researchers from Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Morocco and even Saudi Arabia, if they have another passport, to come visit us to learn from our experience.
Thank you. That's a very inspiring note to end on, and we can only hope that this research and innovation and international collaboration continues. So now I would like to open it up to our audience for any questions they might have.
Oh, we have someone from NJIT. I didn't mention that just because I saw you. I was just on one speaker, on one, oh my.
Yeah, Julie is one of our awesome members. She's the founder of an incredible group about psychologists against anti-Semitism. So I'd love to turn it over to Julie.
So we have a good collaboration in electrical engineering.
Yes, and I'm in the Department of Informatics in the College of Computing at NJIT, and I remember your visit when Dean Gottsman was the dean, Craig, and I currently have a collaboration. It's the NJIT BGU grant collab with Dr. Mickey Fire.
Oh, nice.
At Ben-Gurion, and we're studying social media influencers in the online space who are trying to combat anti-Semitism and looking at trends of anti-Jewish hate and anti-Semitism online. So I'm really appreciative that not only for fostering my research, but developing this relationship now with a faculty member with mutual interests at BGU. So wanted to express that.
Thanks.
I believe we have a question from Ed Beck. If you can unmute yourself.
Earlier, Mark talked about establishing relationships and more exchanges. And I developed a program when I was with another organization where through JNF and several donors, we actually took American faculty, mostly non-Jewish, many non-Jewish, I wouldn't say mostly, many non-Jewish, to establish academic ties with scholars in at several universities. Rivka Karmi was president of the university at the time. But we went to Hebrew University, Haifa University, the Technion, and several other universities. And we grouped faculty by interest, American and Israeli faculty. And it's my understanding to this day, some of those research efforts are still going on. I'm wondering if AEN, and I see Miriam on the call, we can reestablish these kinds of programs in the middle of this renewed informal BDS and situation, so that American colleagues can express their solidarity with their Israeli colleagues. I can't see a better way of doing that, and of course, Julia's is doing that independently.
Ed, I can answer that. AEN was very, very pleased to support financially and logistically missions to the faculty missions to Israel that happened in March. I was on two of them. That was those included faculty for Harvard, Dartmouth, and Stanford, and then later MIT and Berkeley. There was also a Yale delegation. We are working very closely with a group from the University of Cincinnati who will be doing a solidarity and educational mission in May, and that one will be unique because it has a lot of buy-in from their administrators as well. Administrators will be participating on the trip. So AEN is very committed to this. And you mentioned the fellowship with JNF USA. We're happy to say that we have gotten grants from JNF USA. I'm a JNF board member, and we've gotten grants from JNF USA to work with alumni from that faculty fellowship to integrate them into the AEN network and bring what they learned into our organization and have them have access to our resources as well. So we are very committed to this. We're also committed to the post-trip programming. It's not just the trip that matters, it's what they're going to bring back. I just want to mention a really special initiative that was piloted at MIT by two faculty who went on the MIT mission. It's called Kalaniot, named after the red flowers that are ubiquitous in the south of Israel. And that is serves a dual purpose of bringing Israeli PhD students and postdocs to U.S. universities, having them do their studies and research here, but also integrating within the university and academic community as a way of building understanding and empathy for Israel, as a way of countering anti-Semitism on campus. So it has those dual missions. So we're very excited about this. Sarah Monison, if you could unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much for making the time to have this event. It's a real privilege to hear directly from the president of a university who's dealing with so much, and thank you. I wanted to ask a delicate question, which has to do with navigating the fact that some of the most vocal BDS supporters and some of the most troubling sources of some really horrible rhetoric and some tremendous discomfort are Jewish students and Jewish faculty who, so I know quite a number of examples in my own community at Northwestern in Chicago and outside of the university and the local school districts and things like this, that some of the people making the most hateful and troubling and divisive and polarizing activities and arguments are the kind of Jewish voices for peace and this kind of stuff. And I think it for me, it's you talked about this passive BDS where people are not getting invited and this kind of stuff. There's also, I mean, I find in my own experience, I don't even have the privilege of being able to assume that when I'm meet some other Jewish folks that I'm in a community of solidarity immediately, you know? So I just wonder if there's any reflections on that dimension of the problem.
Well, first of all, that's the reason I made Aliyah in 1984, because the only place to be a leftist Jew is in Israel. Unfortunately, sometimes it seems like. So I wouldn't actually have that problem. Second of all, I'm a plant biologist by training and not a psychologist or a Jewish historian. So my looking at it is rather two-dimensional. But throughout Jewish history, we've always seen a portion of our community that has thought that if they act in a certain way or believe in a certain way, they will be accepted, only to find out that they're the last ones to be put on the trains. I mean, and there's not the only way I relate to them in the same way that I relate to any other hater to a certain extent is that we just have to keep holding up the picture, holding up the mirror, exposing anti-Semitism for what it is. I mean, there's the universal definition of anti-Semitism. Holding up that in the United States, you just celebrated colonialism with a lovely holiday and a turkey, but that it actually at Ben-Gurion University we have the most Zionist story possible. We have Professor Jihad Asana. It's an unfortunate first name. Professor Jihad Asana is a professor of computer science, the first Bedouin professor worldwide of computer science. He used to be the head of the department, and he specializes in computer vision, but especially in using it to decipher ancient Semitic texts that are engraved on rocks in the Negev. And so, you have Jihad, who is deciphering 2,000-year-old Jewish Hebrew, that the same Hebrew that we use, that Jews use in prayer books, which sort of goes against the colonialist argument, Western colonialist argument. And we just have to keep doing these things, and we have to keep talking about the talk I gave at Oxford, Ben-Gurion University as a paradigm for inclusive diversity. I got to leave you with a story, a true story from about a year and a half ago. I got a call from Sarah, the president of Rochester.
Mangelsdorf.
Yeah, Magensdorf.
Sarah Mangelsdorf.
Yeah, a close colleague of mine. She was having troubles with the BDS. This was March 2021, actually. No, 22. And she called me to ask for advice. And she had done everything wrong possible. And the head of the Hillel had done it wrong. And I told her about a demonstration that had been at Ben-Gurion University. We had a Nakba Day demonstration at Ben-Gurion University. It became sort of infamous because of the way it panned out on social media. And she said, "What? You can have Palestinian flags, a Nakba Day demonstration in Israel on your campus?" I said, "Sure, we have freedom of speech. Palestinian flag isn't illegal." I said, we brought together the Communist Arab Student Union and the far right Jewish Student Union. We brought them together, decided what would be considered hate speech, what's not considered hate speech, how far apart the two groups would be, how many ushers they would have to bring to keep order, closed off the campus from outside instigators. They screamed at each other between 12 and 1, and at 1:15 they were all back together in classes together. I thought it was an incredible success. I just on Facebook I got destroyed, and then I got called to testify to our local Stefano, but at the Knesset. But she said, "What, you got Arabs and Jews to discuss these things and to come up agreed upon?" She goes, "I can't even get Democrats and Republicans to agree on how to have a meeting on my campus." And I said to her, "Sarah, but the difference is we accept complexity. We understand complexity in Israel. We understand that we're not going to agree on everything, but that we still have to learn how to live together. It's a life and death situation. And so we know how to talk to people without having to hate them on campuses and to agree to disagree. And then she invited my vice president for diversity and inclusion, and I know that that's a dirty word in some circles right now, Professor Sarab Abu Rabia, Israel's first female Bedouin professor, who brought a delegation of 2 Jews and 2 Muslims to lead workshops on shared society at the University of Rochester. And it was so successful that we started getting invites to many other universities, and then came October 7th. So we just have to keep holding up our values and the true stories about what Israel is about. And I think what we really need to bring to campuses are, as you said, the non-Jewish professors, and I would say, and particularly in the social sciences and humanities. The sciences is an easy sell. We have a program, an English language master's program in sustainable African communities. And one of the students from the last cohort was an ANC member from Soweto. But he decided to get a degree at Ben-Gurion anyway. It was free, and he wanted to see what it was all about. And he went back and became became a spokesperson for Israel, that everything that he had been taught about Israel by the ANC was just government propaganda. And, you know, as all of you probably know, you have to see Israel to believe it. And that could be from all sides, left, right, everything. Anyone who wants can find it. But I think what we need to teach about Israel, and I think the teaching moment that we have on campuses, especially in America, is appreciating and dealing with complexity, because American students have completely lost that ability.
Not just students.
Yeah.
I have a question.
You're right. Sarah, you're right.
Steve Sussman.
Yeah, my hand emoji isn't showing, so I apologize.
The real
And
one works also.
I apologize for being late, and I have to leave early for yet actually an ISGAP meeting. So forgive me, but I didn't want to miss this. First of all, yeah, I remember Ben-Gurion University from the early days. My mother was the development director there early on, fundraiser. And I actually made Aliyah in the 70s, but I came back, and I currently was a visiting scholar at the Sloth Academic College a year or 2 ago, and very active. And I love Ben-Gurion University. I lived in the South for quite a while. But my basic question, and you've touched on it, but maybe a little bit more detail, what are some of the ways, I'm sure Ben-Gurion University, being a big university, world famous, so on and so forth, gets pushback as you're making these, while you're trying to make connections with scholars or universities around the world and partnerships. And you may have addressed it before, I apologize. How do you handle that? I'm not sure the exact question, so to speak, but are you getting pushback, and how do you handle that?
Interestingly, I'm finding out, first of all, that the BDS network has read everything I've ever written, which is they know everything I've said more than the supporters, American Friends of Ben-Gurion University. And where I'm getting the most pushback that seems logical and not hateful is by that Ben-Gurion University trains all of Israel's Air Force pilots, and we have very close connections to the IDF. And so we're being called out as being a military university that is supporting the genocide of the Palestinian people. And the point that we have to keep, now, the people who are saying this don't really want to hear anything, but there are a lot of other people who are listening who really don't know what the facts are. And we just have to keep reiterating that Ben-Gurion University, first of all of Israeli universities are independent public universities and not governmental universities. That's my big fight that I have here, is making sure that we do not become government-controlled universities like in Hungary or in Russia or in Turkey. And that second of all, Israeli universities, like almost every university in the United States, has contracts with military, with all types, with different contractors. And third, that Israel, as a country, is a citizen's army. There is no separation between the army and society, since we are all soldiers and we are all under attack. And as October 7th showed, that when there is a constitution of the Hamas, and I recommend that you read it, and it calls for the annihilation of Jews, I have to believe that they're serious. And so I'm sorry for wanting to defend myself, but that's what we have, is an army that is a defensive army, and people get killed in war. And I'm very sorry for that. But we did not start the war. And that's the pushback I'm getting. So people will say, I'm not anti-Israel. I just want to cut off ties with the military. So you can't have ties with any Israeli university. Oh, you can't have ties with any Israeli students because they were all in the reserve. I'm sorry, Israel can't exist.
While they talk about it on an Israeli-developed cell phone and so on and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, no, but that really highlights the sort of disingenuousness of a lot of the pro BDS arguments that, we're not boycotting individuals, we're boycotting institutions. But then it turns out that, any individual affiliated with an institution is ultimately
There was a
instigated.
fabulous article, which I could send you. It's in Hebrew, but it's easily Google translated, that was written by the head of the Communist Student Union at BGU, the one who did that wonderful demonstration that got me in trouble. He visited the encampment he calls it my strange visit to a Palestinian encampment at Oxford. And he said that he wrote this article saying that they're treating me as the noble savage, that they've expropriated my culture. And I asked them what their goals are, and they said boycotting Israel, divestment from Israel, no Israeli academics, and number 5 was rebuilding the Gaza universities. And he said to them, well, if you're here at a university, shouldn't number 5 be your first choice, your first priority? He said, by boycotting them, you're making sure that I won't get a degree. Who are you to say that the Arabs or Palestinians living? We had students from Gaza at Ben-Gurion University on October 6th. So we have to keep exposing the disingenuity, as you called it.
So we have about 10 minutes left. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to share them.
I had one thing I'd like Danny to comment on. Many of us were distressed when the Association of American University Professors sort of opened the door to academic boycotts, something historically they never a position they never took. And to me, it was a movement from an organization that was trying to call the balls and strikes on academic freedom versus propaganda and other important issues in universities, and a movement toward becoming a labor union. And like many white-collar labor unions in the United States, they gravitate to the pro-Palestinian position. I guess, Danny, I would ask you if you have a comment on that, and if you've seen any distinct impact of the position the AAUP has taken.
Well, yeah, because it's legitimized behaviors, things that you could not. I grew up with anti-Semitism. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania in a very small town. If you're a football fan, you would know it. It's Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, between Pittsburgh and Cleveland, where I was the only Jew in my whole school district. I knew about anti-Semitism. I had no misconceptions that our generation would be different or that America was different. And what this declaration has done, it's just given a free pass to people to say what they were to do or say what they were embarrassed to do or say before. I got a letter, we had asked for a letter of recommendation for one of our biochemistry professors from someone at Princeton. And I got a letter back saying, while I'm a big fan of Dr. Cohen's work, as long as the genocidal actions of your government are happening, I refuse to write a letter of recommendation. I refuse to write a letter of recommendation for him. And he signed his name like with no shame whatsoever. And so what we need to make sure is done is the voices calling out this. We need to call out bad behavior. We need to call out the idiocy when the American Association of Sociologists or the American Sociological Society bans Israelis, or says that rape is a matter of context. This has to be called out
And
at an organized level.
AEN is there on the front lines doing that whenever there are attempts to boycott Israel and Israelis at academic associations, whenever there is rank hypocrisy coming from the academy, AEN members are there and really leading the efforts to shine a light on the toxicity, but also to shine a light for a better path for the academy. Because
one of the things we're considering doing, I think we discussed this a few months ago. I don't remember if it, so the Council of University Presidents has hired an advisor on fighting the BDS, a former ambassador named Emmanuel Nachshon. He was the head of public diplomacy. And we've hired a lawyer in Brussels to sue any university for racism if they exclude Israelis from ERC funding or EU funding. And very quickly, all of these universities, which said that they're going to boycott all Israelis, they will know, said, well, institutionally, we will not collaborate with Israeli institutions, but any researcher can do whatever they want. And we're wondering if we need to take an approach in the United States of suing organizations for racism.
I think we have one question from Sarah.
Yeah, on that, I'm all for taking these more dramatic actions because, it's most funding agencies. You can say, oh, I want to just take that individual Israeli, but I won't work with an institution. But most funding agencies, as anybody who knows how universities work, want to send the money to the institution. I mean, university, individual faculty don't get checks from foundations that are funding research, right? These are so sometimes I wanted to come back to your point about complexity, because I think that a lot of the efforts to try to fight BDS and stuff, people don't really know how. A lot of faculty and students, they don't know how universities actually work. They don't have the background or the experience of how intimately logistically and things work. So they think you can just sever a tie and it's not going to have any implications in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I would really favor not just the philosophical arguments and the moral arguments and, but also work to expose work to inform people about those complexities that you were mentioning before. So, and the legal cases, I think, are one way to do that.
Rafa, can I just piggyback on Sarah's point? And thank you so much, Danny, for all that you do, Executive Director of AEN. We've been privileged to bring delegations of our administrators who work year-long program with us to Ben-Gurion and to Tel Aviv University, Hebrew University, Haifa University. And one of the things that we do is we connect them with those diversity, inclusion, and belonging officials and staff, so that they can really get a sense of this complexity of the university. They go back and then they tell the students, it doesn't work like this in Israel. We've seen it. We've talked to our counterparts, and they're able to really improve the campus climate in ways that are very meaningful because they know the reality of the Israeli university system. So at the last few minutes of this webinar, I'm wondering if I can make a request of Vera and of the university heads that maybe, putting together a delegation like you did for U of R, but doing that in a national way, a way to bring these expert officials and staff, in particular ones who are Israeli Arab, Bedouin, Christians, Muslims, the counterparts, bring them to various universities so they can really explain to university officials here how you are creating a shared society. The universities are an oasis. You do have academic freedom, committed to that. And I think it's kind of like a BDS buster because it really shows the way in which the AUP, the MLA, the Middle Eastern Studies Center, all these organizations do not understand the university system in Israel. And once they have that knowledge, they may be better able to put up, a pushback when they get it from their faculty.
We would be very happy to do that. It's something we've been talking on. If you could help us organize that, I guess, Raifa, you would be the point of contact.
I could be a point of contact. It's usually the other way around. I work with our faculty to
Right.
organize
Yeah, I don't know who would be
missions to Israel, but yeah, but
I don't know who the point of contact would be, Miriam, but
feel free to be in touch with me for the time being.
Yeah.
Dvora Margolis from Vera, who be in touch with her or with me directly, and we could get it organized if you could figure out where we should be going.
That sounds amazing. So in the 2 minutes we have left, I just want to very quickly ask, what is next for Ben-Gurion University?
Well, if there's anyone on the call who has $500 million that they're wanting to, what is next for Ben-Gurion University? We're doubling the size of our campus right now. We're in the mid. I don't know when the last time Stephen said you've been here, but I don't know when the last time it was. We're doubling our
5 years ago.
Doubling our footprint in Beersheba, where we have to build. We're building 22 new research buildings. All of this because of the move of the IDF to the south. We're doubling the size of our computer science faculty. And it's just incredible things that are happening in the Negev, especially post October 7th. We had our largest incoming class ever this year, while other universities went down. This Generation Z is looking for fulfillment. And a lot of that fulfillment they find through coming now down to the Negev.
That is a very inspiring and hopeful note to end on. I want to thank Danny for being so open and candid and sharing his time and his words with us. Thank you so much. And we will see you.
If anyone going to be in Miami on Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to be there as part of the Jerusalem Post.
I'll be there. Over at the shul at Bal Harbor.
I guess that's where it is. Yeah.
I'll be there.
Getting in on Monday.
You don't
I'll be
plan
there
on being
Tuesday.
in Miami in the first week of January, do you?
No. And then from there, I'm going to Los Angeles, and then there from San Francisco.
That's too bad.
So Stephen, look me up, find me on email, and we'll make time to meet.
I just Facebook you and LinkedIn you, so
Okay,
we'll be in
great.
touch. Thank you so much. And from a fellow Pennsylvania. All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you so much. All right. We'll see you on the next webinar.
Bye-bye.